In 2017, a 5-year-old boy was playing outside his home in Soweto, Johannesburg. He didn't have a care in the world, and he should have been able to continue being this happy and carefree. Unfortunately, he wouldn't survive through the day. 5-year-old Taniko Rexon was innocent, and this may have been why he was targeted by the 21-year-old monster lurking just outside his home. The man, with a thirst for something inside the child's body, pounced on him. He didn't try to kidnap him or take him away to another location. Instead, he needed what the child had immediately. Grabbing Taniko, he stabbed him 3 times in the neck and then threw him to the ground. The killer didn't try to run, he didn't try to get away, and he didn't care who was watching. He kneeled in front of the dying child and started to drink the blood that was coming out of his neck. Witnesses to this gruesome incident claimed that the man was wearing religious clothing, and that after he drank the child's blood, he just stood there. While this may have been a coincidence, the event did take place a couple of days before Good Friday, which led a lot of people to believe that this may have been a ritual killing. This, of course, is not uncommon, as many people believe that ritual sacrifices take place around Easter and Good Friday. This is done to try and bastardize the sacrifice of Christ. While the locals would eventually capture the man and the police would arrest him, not much else would come from this case. No explanation would be found on why the man drank the child's blood, and no connection between him and the child would be found. I do believe, however, that this child was killed simply because he was a child. Children are seen as the most innocent and protected in society. This means that the murder of the child, to appease some kind of entity, would allegedly grant the person who did it immense power. However, this is just one of the many cases we will be covering today. All of these showing evidence of the existence of vampires, because I do believe that vampires exist, just not in the way that pop culture has portrayed them. Instead, to really make sense of the brutal crimes we are about to talk about, we have to go back to the roots of vampires and their savage history in true crime events. Monsters don't have to be strangers. They can sometimes be your oldest friends. That's the situation one South African woman found herself in 2016. The 53-year-old woman, Teresa Simon, and her husband, Andor Simon, had decided to visit 2 of their close friends. They had met these friends 2 years earlier in a bar. However, things were about to go extremely wrong, and it all started when they showed up at their friend's home at 10:30 in the morning. Their friends were also a couple, just like them, and they all started drinking together. They would soon, however, run out of alcohol, and their friends would borrow money from them to buy some more. By the time they had finished drinking the newly purchased alcohol, they had consumed 4 bottles of wine. Teresa's husband had decided to take a walk around that time. However, he would only make it to a park bench across the street before he collapsed and passed out. Back inside the home, Teresa had become drowsy, and although she tried to stay awake, she also passed out. When she woke up, she found herself on the floor completely paralyzed, and the demeanor of her friends had changed. The woman was dragging her around, as the man said that he would kill her. However, they started to torture her first. The couple used cigarettes to burn her. They stabbed her, and the man started drinking blood from her wounds. Not being able to fight back, she did the only thing that she could do, which was pray. This angered the man, as he said that God's name was not allowed in his house. Close to death, Teresa inexplicably got the power to move again, and she escaped the couple. Her attackers were eventually arrested. This case, while showing signs of a vampire attack, also shows signs of a demonic possession, with the personality of the attackers changing very quickly and them not wanting to hear the name of God. However, how do we distinguish a demon from a vampire or any other monster? To find out exactly what a vampire is, we have to first find out how their legend was created. Although many consider the novel Dracula by Bram Stoker to have created the legend, the truth is, like most other legends, vampire folklore has been around for thousands of years, so far back that we can't exactly pinpoint the story that created it. Regardless, many people believe that the vampire legend comes from a misunderstanding of how death works. Premature burials occur when a person is buried while still alive because doctors, their friends, or their families believe that they are dead. While premature burials are uncommon today, in the past we didn't have the technology that we have now, and in many cases people were buried alive. In some cases, these people were lucky enough to dig themselves out of their graves and return to their families, scaring many people into thinking that they were the dead rising. What none of these legends account for is why vampires drink blood. However, that could be attributed to any number of things, like the dead needing human blood to continue living, or the legends of the vampires being mixed in with the legends of cannibals. So now that we know that vampires are the undead, or at least people who are believed to be dead, and that they need blood to survive, it leads us to one of the most notorious cases of a vampire in history. Between 1977 and 1978, the Vampire of Sacramento took the lives of at least 6 people. Richard Trenton Chase killed men, women, and children, and although he mutilated some of the corpses, the most famous thing he was known for is drinking blood. In his early adult life, Richard had developed hypochondria, which made him believe that his heart occasionally stopped, and that during those moments he was medically dead. His first crimes involved him capturing and killing small animals so that he could eat their organs, often mixing them with sodas or blending them up. When he tried to inject rabbit's blood into his body, he was institutionalized into a medical facility, where the staff had taken to calling him Dracula because of his fixation with blood. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia and paranoid delusions and released into the custody of his mother. However, it would only be a matter of time before his obsession with blood started again. In mid-1997, he was arrested because he smeared blood onto his body, and a bucket of blood was found in his vehicle. However, no charges were filed because it was found to be cow's blood. Later, his first victim was killed in a drive-by shooting. 2 weeks later, he had attempted to kill again when he tried to get into a woman's house. However, since the doors were locked, he left. Richard claimed that open doors were an invitation for him to come in, and that closed doors meant he had to leave, much like the legend of a vampire. In 1978, he broke into the home of a pregnant woman. He proceeded to shoot her, remove some of her organs, do unspeakable acts to her body, and then drink her blood. Later that month, he killed another woman, her 6-year-old son, and a 20-month-old nephew. He was eventually caught and stood trial, where he received the death penalty. During his time in prison, he claimed that the crimes were not his fault, and that they had something to do with aliens and the Nazis. Before his death sentence was given to him, he took his own life by overdosing on prescribed medication. You may now be wondering how these true crime stories about monsters who rise from the dead are related to the stories of people who take lives. It normally wouldn't be until you realize that the first vampire story ever written was based on a true life event. In 1819, John Polidori wrote a short story called The Vampire. The story is about a poet named Lord Byron who did many amazing things. However, he was also known for his affairs with many women. While as far as we know, Lord Byron didn't murder any of these women or drink their blood, the fact that one of the first vampire stories was based on a true life person does provide an intriguing connection between fact and fiction. Something else that should be taken into account is that even though stories of vampires were based on real life people, there were other aspects added to the stories, so it may be possible that vampires do exist. However, not as what pop culture tells us they are. They may not be undead, they may just have chosen a darker path in life, choosing to attack and kill innocent people because they are obsessed with their blood. Now that we've talked about some real life stories, let's talk about one that's a bit more crazy, and that's the story of Elizabeth Bathory. Elizabeth was a noblewoman who allegedly between 1590 and 1610 killed 650 people She would mutilate and torture these victims, who are claimed to be mostly female. Now, if the claims were true, and she did actually kill these girls, then she did it for a very peculiar reason. According to folklore surrounding Elizabeth, she would kill these girls to bathe in her blood because it allegedly helped her retain her beauty. When she was eventually caught and put on trial, she avoided the death penalty because of her family's influence. Instead, she was put on house arrest. Other legends claim that instead of house arrest, she was bricked into a room in her family's castle. She died allegedly of natural causes and left all her wealth to her children. She is now known as one of history's most prolific female serial killers. However, the number of her victims are very disputed. While in the past, vampires were looked at with the same fear as the boogeyman, where children would check for them under their bed before they went to sleep, in the present day, people seem to have a love affair with vampires. This of course comes mainly from books, movies, and television shows. Things like Interview with a Vampire, Twilight, and The Vampire Diaries have cemented the vampire as a love interest. Around the mid-2000s and late 2010s, people became obsessed with vampires, and although vampire entertainment has become a bit stale, it's clear now that vampires are no longer looked at as the enemy. Instead, they are looked at as misunderstood beings. This is what happens to all legends eventually. They evolve and change so that they can survive in the new world. And I personally am glad that the vampire legend continues to survive. However, it's not like this in all countries. And in some countries, the legend of the vampire has led to the deaths of innocent people. There have been a number of vampire hunts in Malawi. In these countries, mobs gather together and hunt people that they believe are vampires. They identify vampires as people who drink human blood and use it in rituals. However, whether they believe these people have rose from the dead or have special powers is unknown. However, this is a form of vigilantism, and there is no proof that any of the people who are killed were supernatural in any way. Even if they are guilty of drinking blood, I don't believe it gives these groups the rights to kill them. Instead, this is an example of how legends can lead to mass hysteria and also lead to people being murdered. I do not condone any type of witch or vampire hunts, and I urge people who believe that others are drinking blood to report it to law enforcement as soon as possible. While many people may have grown out of the fear of things that go bump in the night, the reality of the situation is that many of these things may exist, just not in the form that we believe they do. Vampires are one of these things, and while they may not be cursed or undead, they do kill. And according to the evidence we've covered, they also drink blood. So after hearing all of this, do you believe that vampires exist? Tell me in the comment section and subscribe for more videos.